Okay, so what better way to start our morning than with this next speaker? This session is titled Cheers to Monday, Three Simple Steps to Unstress Your Work. And we are super excited to have none other than Amy Leneker. Amy is a leadership expert, a speaker, and an author of the upcoming book, Cheers to Monday. With more than 22 years in public service for the state of Washington, Amy has dedicated her career to helping people lead and live with less stress and more joy. When she's not inspiring audiences or writing, Amy enjoys life's adventures with her husband Corey, their two kids, and their two delightfully wacky dogs. Her philosophy: life is worth celebrating, no matter what day of the week it is. So, for anyone that hasn't already heard Amy speak, get ready to be inspired because she is amazing. Please welcome Amy Leneker.
Great. Thank you, Talia. I'm so grateful to be here. When I was 15, I saw the ocean for the first time and I fell in love. And it has been a love affair that has lasted my entire life. I grew up in a tiny town in the Midwest where you did not get to the ocean in a day. And it has become the place where I feel the most alive, where I feel the most free. And it turns out that there's actually a word for what I've been experiencing all of this time. And it's a word that comes from the Dutch. There is not an English translation, but it loosely means to let the wind take away what's not serving you. And that is essentially what happens when I'm near the ocean. The wind takes away what's not serving me, and it creates space where other things that I do want in my life come. My my relationship with leadership was not as romantic as my relationship with the ocean. And I quickly climbed the career ladder in state government. And what I found is that the more my leadership responsibilities increased, the more my stress increased, the more my anxiety increased. Until just after my 40th birthday, I had thought I had a heart attack. I was in my doctor's office convinced I was dying. And he said, "You're not having a heart attack, you're having a panic attack." And it was the first of hundreds that would come, these stress induced panic attacks. And so I set out to figure out what in the world is happening. And so I did what any introverted research nerd would do. I dove into a literature review to find out what was happening. Why was this happening? If I finally had the job that I'd worked my entire career to get, I had gone into student loan debt to go to graduate school to get the job I had finally gotten. Why in the world was I so stressed out? Why was I so miserable? So I read everything I could get my hand on. I gathered as much quantitative data as I could. And then I started hosting focus groups. I did them in organizations across different sectors. I did them more than once in line at Starbucks. If someone said they were stressed, I needed to find out why. Tell me more. I became a heat-seeking missile for stress stories. And I started calling them stress interventions. If a leader or a team wanted to talk about stress, I was ready to listen because I knew there had to be a better way. And I wasn't alone. What I was experiencing, so many other leaders and teams were experiencing too. And so over the next couple of years, what I developed was an incredibly simple framework to help us lead with less stress and more joy. And it's surprisingly simple, and it's why it works. And it's three steps. They're simple, but they're not easy. And that might sound like semantics. Well, what's the difference between simple and easy? There's actually a really big difference. Simple is that it's going to take effort. It's going to take us doing something we haven't done before in order to get a result we haven't gotten before. So, in our short time together today, I'm going to walk you through what these three steps are so that you can start using them at work. And you don't have to wait to put these skills into place. You can start using them later today. And while we're here in the context of work, and I'm going to talk about this framework through the lens of work, you're going to find that this works just as well outside of work too. It's going to work just as well in your life outside of what you do during the day. So let's dive in. Let's look at what are these three simple steps. And the first step is we've got to be able to see it. We've got to be able to see our stress differently if we're going to have a different result. Step two, we're going to sort your stress into actionable categories. So often we think about stress as one big tangled up ball of yarn at work, and it's not the most effective way to solve it. So today I'm going to teach you how do we sort it into 5 categories that we can actually do something about. And then in step 3, we're going to solve it. It's one thing to say, okay, great, I've identified all of these stressors. Now, what am I going to do? That's step 3. We're actually going to look at how do we solve it without spinning? How do we solve it without that constant angst of rumination? So we've got to be able to see our stress differently. And that starts by understanding how challenging has our stress been. And a really simple way to think about this is on a scale of 0 to 10, how challenging has your stress been? And this Likert scale intentionally doesn't define challenging for you because what you think of as challenging, a colleague of yours might not think it's challenging at all. It's challenging according to you. It also doesn't put a time frame on it. It doesn't say, how challenging has your stress been in the last week? Or how challenging has your stress been in the last month? Because what we know about stress, if you put a time box around it, you might be missing out on really important information. If I go into an organization and I say, how challenging is your stress today? But something really difficult happened on that team last week or happened last month, then I have missed data that's really important to know. So it doesn't define challenging, it doesn't put a timestamp on it, and it also doesn't ask you to distinguish between your work and your life. Here's what we know as humans, that how we're doing at work impacts how we're doing at home. And how you're doing at home impacts how you're doing at work. We have known this intuitively all along, but now there's research to back it up. The most recent research shows that 84% of American workers are feeling high amounts of stress at work, and 54% of those say it's impacting their life outside of work. Those numbers are high. And if that's not you, if you're saying, well, I'm actually not feeling a lot of stress at work, or my stress isn't impacting my life at home, it's really important for you to understand that the people you're working with may be having that experience. When we use this simple scale repeatedly on a 0 to 10, how challenging is our stress been? What it does is it starts to normalize talking about it. It starts to normalize as a team talking about stress. What we're trying to do is avoid burnout. There is no question that burnout has significant, really detrimental consequences on individuals, on teams, and entire organizations. The health outcomes of burnout are tremendous. And burnout is simply unmanaged stress. It's chronically unmanaged stress. So, by definition, if you at work and you on your team can figure out ways to manage stress as you go, then you are setting yourself up to not burn out. It's when we don't do this that we're setting ourselves up for burnout. When we think about how to see our stress differently, we've got to get it from our head and we've got to get it from our heart onto paper. And I think the easiest way to do this is using post-it notes. You don't have to, though. You could just use a piece of paper. You could use a notes app on your phone. There's no right or wrong way. Post-it notes, though, I think work the best because when we get to the next step of sorting, the post-it notes make it incredibly easy to do that. So the first thing that I would invite you to do is you are going to write down your work stressors. And you're going to write down one stressor per post-it note. And if you're wondering, whoa, this is moving fast, how am I going to do all of this? You don't have to do this now. When I do this with teams, it takes a half a day or sometimes a whole day. So you don't have to race through the process. I'm just teaching you how to use the process so that when you're ready, you've got all of the tools that you need to do it. For some people, writing down work stressors can feel stressful. It can actually feel more stressful to have to think about, why is it that I'm feeling stressed at work? I understand that. I hear it in almost every workshop I facilitate. And trust me on the process. Trust me to get it out of your head, get it out of your heart, get it onto paper. We've got to be able to see, what is it that you're dealing with. We can't move into the next steps of sorting it and solving it if we don't know what it is we're dealing with. When you've got your work stressors written down, you've got an idea of what it is that's causing your stress. Now you've got to see it through a lens of whether or not it's important. We've got to see it through the lens of, where is it that you're going to spend your time? Where is it that you're going to spend your energy? It's worth remembering that if everything is important, then nothing is important. And as a team, you'll have your own criteria for what makes a stressor important. You'll know what that is on your team. As an individual, you'll get to decide that on your own. What, as an individual, is it that allows your stressor to rise to that next level of what's important versus not important? When you've done that, so now you've got it all on paper, you've figured out what's important, now we've got to figure out what is within your control. I spend so much time with leaders who are feeling incredible amounts of stress about things outside of their control. And it is a recipe for burnout. That is not what we want to do. We do not want that to happen for you. So when you've got your stressors and you've identified what's important and what's not important, you now want to see it through the lens of, do you have control over that stressor? Based on how you answer that question, then you'll know, where does that stressor live on this framework? It's going to end up in one of these 4 quadrants on that framework. When you've done that, now we can actually sort it. We can look at, let's figure out how we can sort our stress into actionable categories. And as I mentioned earlier, we sometimes think about stress as one big thing to solve, but it's really not. There are 5 distinct kinds of work stress, and let's look at what they are. And I'm going to be curious to see if you are experiencing some of them or maybe all of them. So let's look at the 5 types of work stress, because once you know the 5, you won't look at work stress the same again. The first one is called schedule stress. And schedule stress is when there is simply not enough time in the day to do what you need to do. There are not enough days in the week to do what you need to do. No matter how much you work, no matter how many lunches you skip or how many breaks you pass by, there isn't enough time to do what you need to do. So I'm wondering, could we use chat for just a moment? And could you type in a number 1 into chat if you are experiencing schedule stress? This idea of not having enough time to do what you need to do. Okay, yeah, holy cow, lots of ones. And some of you are like, I'm feeling schedule stress, and yet I'm still here in this conference, adding to my schedule stress. Okay. Oh, and lots of ones. I see you. I just saw someone put like 6 or 7 ones. Okay. When we are looking at schedule stress, this is so important, and here's why. Gallup has been studying burnout for decades. They've been studying employee engagement and burnout for decades. And here's what they have found. Individuals who say that they have enough time to do their work are 70% less likely to burn out. So let me say that one more time. According to Gallup, who's been doing this for decades, if you say, yeah, I've got enough time to do my work, you are 70% less likely to burn out. The problem, friends, is in my 20 plus years in government, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I felt like I had enough time to do my job. There was always more work to do. And often the reward for finishing work was more work. That is schedule stress. And I just saw Antonia says, I'm actually multitasking right now. Yeah. And there's no shame or blame in that. Yes, you are writing a report, you're listening to this because the schedule stress. There's simply not enough time in the day to do what you're trying to do. And of course, the problem with that, the problem with what Antonia is so bravely admitting to doing, which all of us do throughout the day, is that it causes a tremendous cognitive load on our brain. There really isn't any such thing as multitasking. Our brain has to move from one thing to the next to the next, and it's incredibly taxing. So, this thing that we do because there isn't another option ends up increasing our levels of stress. Microsoft did research recently where they tracked brain waves for people throughout the day. And what they found was that even short breaks, even 5 to 7 minute breaks between meetings, allowed the brain to reset. And I would bet that for so many of you, you are not getting 5 to 7 minutes between meetings to reset. You're jumping from one thing to the next, or even if you have a break, even if you've got a 10-minute break, you're checking email or you're having a quick conversation. What it's doing is it's creating a tremendous cognitive load on our brain, and that is making our stress, unfortunately, go higher. So let's look at the second type. The second type of stress is called suspense stress. Suspense stress is anticipatory stress. It's when we're waiting for something. It's when things are ambiguous. It's when things are uncertain. And the very act of waiting for something is making our stress go up. So it may be that a decision hasn't been made yet, or you know that something's coming, you just don't know when. So go ahead and put a number 2 in the chat feature. Are you feeling suspense stress at work? You're waiting for something, you're not sure when it's going to happen, you're not sure if it's going to happen. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay. So, no shortage of suspense stress on this team. Someone just said every single time, yes. Oh, SNAP benefits, yes. I feel this all day. I see this with layoffs. I feel this with the budget. Yes, there's a reorg right now. I see you, Joni. I'm bracing for impact. This is what anxiety feels like to me. State layoffs, yes, Jennifer, absolutely. Barb talked about federal action on grants. Yes, 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 and yes. That is all suspense stress. It's now, I'm getting messages from recipients. It's constant for me. It's feeling like collective trauma, Marianne. Yes, absolutely. I have travel. Okay. That is suspense stress. And we have to understand why this is happening. Suspense stress is because our brains like certainty. Our brains love continuity. Our brains love patterns. It's why if you are a parent or you're an aunt or an uncle, you may have a little in your life that wants you to read the exact same story every night, even though you've read the same story 37,000 times. What's happening in that little's brain is the same thing that happens in our brains. We like continuity. We like patterns. Our brain likes knowing what to expect. And when we can't do that, when there are these tremendous amounts of uncertainty, it causes a huge cognitive load on our brain. You may have seen lately, Brene Brown and Adam Grant just did a really interesting podcast together. They did a 6-part series where they talk about this very thing, that as humans, we are not wired for this level of change, this constant churn, this almost what can feel like debilitating amounts of change. Our brains are not wired for it. That is suspense stress. So on your team, we don't want this to just be something beneath the surface. We don't want this to be something that we're not talking about. We want this to come above the surface. What is the suspense stress that we're feeling? There may be times with suspense stress that you're not sure when an answer is going to come. You're not sure if or when you're going to get the information that you need. And so, to anyone on this call who is a team lead or who is a leader, what I hope you'll remember is that in suspense stress, what you want to do is over communicate. I coach leaders all the time who are waiting until they have all of the information to share it, or they're waiting until they've got everything figured out before they talk to their teams. That is the exact opposite thing you want to do. You want to share what you can as soon as you can, because that is what helps suspense stress go down. Let's say that you are a leader and your organization, and you've got information that you can't share. You've got information that you can't tell your team. You know you've got that information. They know you've got that information. So one of two things can happen. You can say nothing, which is probably not going to help build trust, or you can say something that's going to help alleviate the suspense stress while it builds trust. And that can be as simple as, I will share everything with you the second I can share it. You have my word. The minute I can share it, I will do it. Now you're acknowledging, yeah, I do have some information in my role, and I'll share it if and when I can. Those small things that seem tiny actually, when put together, help our suspense stress go down. Oh, and yes, Kathy, I just saw what you said about SNAP benefits and job security. Thank you for that. There just aren't words for that, and I appreciate that you shared it. That is suspense stress at its worst. That is suspense stress with impact to you and impact to others and impact well beyond that. So thank you for sharing that. The third type of stress is social stress. You can think about social stress as the stress of people, the stress of relationships. I worked with a leader once who said that they loved leading except for the people part. And I thought that doesn't make sense because by definition, leading is the people part. But this third type of stress is social stress. When the relationships at work are making work harder, that is social stress. It might show up as unresolved conflict. It might show up as tension on a team. It might show up as it feels like folks are just starting to be disconnected. So drop a 3 in the chat feature. Are you experiencing social stress where relationships at work are making work harder than easier. Okay, yeah, friends, look, oh my goodness. This is not unusual. And so if you, three cubed, that's funny. You took me back to my high school math days. That's so fun. Okay, so if you were one of the folks that said, yeah, I'm feeling this, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean there isn't any hope. It means that you are feeling one of the most common types of stress at work. We spend a third of our lives at work, sometimes more than a third. If we're together that much, the chances of one of us doing something or not doing something that causes another person stress is pretty high. Social stress is one that we can manage through it. If we have enough trust, if we can talk about it, if we can repair, then we can move forward and actually have a stronger relationship on the other side. Where we get in trouble with social stress is where we're not able to talk about it. It's not psychologically safe to talk about it. Or we can only talk about it with the few folks on the team who we do have trust with, and now it's creating a bigger disconnect on the team. In times of stress, and there's no question that there is a lot of things in the world that we can feel stressed about, what you want is for your team to be a source of support. You want your team to be the place where everyone can go to feel supported, to know that someone's got their back. When we're in times of stress and your own team starts creating social stress, your own organization starts creating social stress, now our stress is magnified. As humans, we are neurobiologically hardwired for connection. That's the reality. Brene Brown's research. We are neurobiologically hardwired for connection. And when there is a threat of disconnection, stress ensues. And at work, that can look like feeling ostracized. It can look like feeling apart from, or not being included on a meeting, or not being disrespected in a briefing. All of those social stressors trigger the same part of your brain that lights up when you're in physical pain. Isn't that fascinating? So if you were to stub your toe or something that caused you physical pain, the same part of your brain that lights up is going to light up when you're feeling social stress at work. Many of you know I'm a certified mediator. I specialize in workplace conflict. I have mediated thousands of hard conversations at work over the years. And when people talk about social stress, because by the time they come to mediation, there is some social stress. And the way they describe it, they use language like, this hurts, or it's so painful to come to work. They're using words that describe physical pain because that's the part of their brain that's lighting up. So if in your team you say things like, they're adults, they'll figure it out, or it can't be this hard, they've got to figure out how to get along. Don't dismiss social stress. It is real and it's having an impact on performance. It has an impact on engagement. It has a huge impact on how likely we are to burn out at work. I will say too, as we're talking about social stress, if you think of someone in your mind who's the opposite of social stress, if you can think of someone at work who's always got your back, on a hard day, they're the ones that show up with your favorite drink order with a little post-it note that says, you've got this. If you're lucky enough to have one of those folks in your life at work, thank them. Thank them today, because that is exactly the kind of energy that offsets social stress, which can feel so hard. Okay, let's look at number 4. Oh, and Tammy, yes, I just saw, I wish I could read all your chats as we were going, but how that sometimes working virtually isn't always what it's cracked up to be, that sometimes that can add social stress. Yes. And the exact opposite can add social stress. Absolutely. So thank you for that. Okay, let's look at number four. Number four is sudden stress. Sudden stress is when something happens that's out of the ordinary. There is an emergency, there is a crisis, there's a fire that you've got to put out. There's something that wasn't planned that's requiring you to do something. So you start your workday and you've got a list of all the things you're going to accomplish. And through no fault of your own, all of these things happen through the day, and now you've done none of those things on your list. Sudden stress are the unexpected, unplanned things that require you to do something. So, would you put a number four in chat? Are you feeling sudden stress where you've got to respond, you've got to be nimble, you've got to figure out how to do something that you weren't exactly planning on doing? Okay. It's almost like there's a contest. How many fours can we put in at one time? I love that. So here's the thing about sudden stress. If we are not careful, and I say this not from a place of judgment, I say this from a place of self-awareness because I did this as a leader more times than I wish I had. If we are not careful, sudden stress can become our default. We can just start operating as if everything is a crisis. We can start operating as if we are always in firefighting mode. The problem is that it is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And there's something fascinating about the research of sudden stress. And that is that when we resolve sudden stress, so if there's a problem at work, it's unexpected, you jump in and fix it. That reaction that happens in your brain, that little surge of chemicals that you get when you were the fixer, becomes addictive over time. Arthur Brooks just wrote about this in the New York Times a few weeks ago about how they're seeing this surge in this sudden stress addiction where you want to be the fixer. Firefighting becomes the mode to when, if things are calm, if there isn't a crisis at work, then you start to worry. Like, what am I missing? What ball am I dropping? Things really can't be this calm, can they? That is sudden stress. And Julie, who just said you're having all four, yeah, Julie, not uncommon at all. When we get to the next step, you're going to see how we're going to start to identify these and how we're going to categorize them for each one of your stressors. So, absolutely. Jennifer notes that four in a previous job was a daily experience. Yeah. And in some jobs, it may be like that. It may be like that because of the nature of the work. It may be like that because of the personalities of the team. Sudden stress is not sustainable over time. By definition, it is supposed to be something out of the ordinary, not something you're doing day in and day out. Okay, let's look at the last one because I promised you there were five. So here's the fifth one. The fifth type of stress is system stress. And I also want to note that the first four line up almost exactly to the work of Dr. Carl Albrecht. So in the 70s, Dr. Albrecht wrote a book called Stress and the Manager, where he identified what were the types of stress organizations were under. And in my research, my top four line up almost exactly with Dr. Albrecht's. Based on my work, I added a fifth, and I added system stress. Your workplace is a system, and your team is a system inside of that system. System stress is when there are overarching issues in your workplace that are causing stress. Things like power imbalance, things like inequity, things like workload that's not evenly distributed. Those are factors of system stress. That's not about the individual. That's not about something you can do on your own. System stress is larger than that. And if we don't talk about system stress, we are missing the boat entirely. There is work from Dr. Christine Maslach, who's sort of the go-to gold standard of burnout research. And what she talks about is that burnout is like a canary in the coal mine. that we have got to focus on making the environment better, not just making canaries more resilient. That is system stress. That yes, we can do all of these things on an individual level, and we can and we should. And system stress recognizes that's not enough. The only way we can resolve stress and burnout at work is if we take our individual responsibility and our organizational responsibility and we put them together. So that's system stress. So would you put a 5 in the chat feature? Are you seeing system stress, power imbalance, inequity, workload that doesn't feel the same? Things feel unfair. There's just a system issue in your workplace that contributes to your stress. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. When I am working with teams, many times system stress is the one they haven't talked about. By the time I show up, and it's usually too late. So by the way, if you need help, call me sooner. Call me sooner rather than later. I was just telling my mom recently, if I get another career, I should get a job where someone's like, "Hey, Amy, this amazing thing happened. We wanted to tell you about it." Because now all of my calls are, "Amy, something bad has happened. We need your help." So, but that is system stress. And it's the one that teams often don't talk about. By the time I show up, maybe they've confronted some schedule stress, maybe they've even talked about some social stress, but system stress can be really hard to talk about, especially if the very system that you're in makes it so talking about it doesn't feel psychologically safe. Now your stress is simply compounded. It's growing exponentially every day. So those are the 5 types of work stress. The way this works in your method is that you have your post-it notes separated into the quadrants. And you'll notice up here on the slide, see how there are numbers on each one? This is when you go through and you say, okay, for each of these stressors, what type of stressor is it? And you'll notice, just like Jennifer had said earlier in the chat, that some stressors might be one type of stress, some might be all 5 types of stress. That is data that is really important for you to know. And when you do this as a team, and I hope you do it as a team, if you're in person, you can put up flip chart paper. If you are virtual, you can use whiteboard in Zoom or Teams. When people start identifying which of the 5 types of stress it is, you are going to have an instant visual of what's happening on your team. You're going to have an instant visual that says, whoa, we have got to talk about our schedules. If everyone has number 1, you can't not talk about it. You can't just say, oh, this is how our calendars are. It's being able to see really specifically which of these 5 types are we feeling. Okay, are you with me so far? So put in a, let's see, what would be a good number? 2 is my favorite number. So put a number 2 in chat. You're with me so far. You're tracking me. You feel like this was a good use of time. You didn't accidentally end up in the wrong Zoom room. Okay. I will tell you though, it has happened more than once that people show up at a conference thinking it was something else. And it's usually my favorite responses. I had one recently where they were like, oh, we thought it was going to be your husband, Corey, but you were pretty great too. Okay. He's my favorite Leneker as well. So I don't hold that against them. Okay, so we've got our unstressing method. We've got our post-it notes, and we have decided whether or not the stressor is important. We've decided whether or not we have control over it. We've decided which type of stress it is, recognizing maybe it's even more than one type of stress. Now it's about solving it. Now we have got to move to step 3. We have got to say, what are we going to do about everything we just identified? For each one of those quadrants in the unstressing method, I have a next action for you to take. And here's what it looks like. Let's start at the bottom left. Let's start in quadrant three. And if you're wondering, well, why in the world start with quadrant three? We're going to start with the one that takes the least amount of effort so we can build up to the ones that take the most amount of effort. So let's start in quadrant three. These are the stressors that you have said, this isn't important to me, and I don't have control over it. When I first created this method, I didn't have actions for stressors that were unimportant. My thinking at the time was, if you've decided something isn't important, then why in the world would we spend another second on it? But what kept happening in workshops and in trainings and in coaching sessions, people would come back and say, this was in quadrant three, but it's bugging me. Or they would say, I know this wasn't important. I know I don't have control, but it's bothering me. What's going on there? So I dug back into the research and started to understand just how much our brains need closure. Our brains do not like open loops. And when you say that stressor is not important, forget about it, just let it go. That is an open loop in your brain that has your brain continuing to think about that stressor. So here's how we can hack it. Here's the hack for your brain. What we have to do, instead of telling ourselves and each other to just let it go, we have to acknowledge it. We have to acknowledge the stressor so we can move on. And if you're thinking, are you serious? Are you telling me that I've really got to acknowledge the stressor? Well, no, you don't, but it's going to stay as an open loop in your brain. Trust me, I've done this with over 100,000 people. Acknowledging it is what will allow your brain to finally move on. And if you're doing this as a team and you end up with stressors that end up in quadrant three, something as simple as this is in quadrant three for now. As a team, this is outside of our control. As a team, this isn't important to us right now, but I appreciate and recognize that it's been weighing on you. That acknowledgement that says when that person came into the room that day, they were feeling stress about that thing matters. And it also builds trust and it drives connection. So that is quadrant three. If we move over one, now we're in quadrant four. These are the stressors that you have said, I have some control over it, but it's not important. What I'm going to encourage you to do is accept it without fixing it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And quadrant four is sneaky because in quadrant four, we're getting stuff done. I am a list maker. Those of you who know me, you know that. I have one right here, as a matter of fact. Everywhere I go, I have lists. And it's embarrassing to admit, but sometimes I will write things down that I've already done just so I can cross it off. There's just this moment of like, yes. Quadrant four is like that. You feel like you're being effective. You feel like you're being productive. But here's the problem. You're spending time and energy on things that aren't important. I have spent 8 hours perfecting a PowerPoint slide that people are going to skim for 2 seconds and never pay attention to again. Do I have control over that? Yeah. Is it important? Probably not. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Quadrant four is accepting it without fixing it. That's the work in quadrant four. Okay, let's move up one. Here we are in quadrant one. In quadrant one, we have said this is important to me, but I don't have control over it. And quadrant one is hard. They're all hard. There's no question. Stress is hard by definition. But quadrant one is really tough in a unique way because for many of us, asking for help is hard. And research from Harvard backs this up, that we underestimate how much other people want to help us. We underestimate that. And when I'm working with leaders who have a really hard time asking for help, 9 times out of 10, they're the leader who's the first one to offer it. Isn't that interesting that the same people who have a hard time asking for help, I'm one of them, are often the same people who offer it? Quadrant one is asking for help. And in quadrant one, there are two things that can happen. The first one is that there is going to be someone you can ask for help. So maybe you are on a deadline and the deadline is coming fast and furious. You do not have control over adjusting that deadline, but your manager does. Or your manager has influence over someone who does. Or you need to make a budget decision. There are going to be things that you need help with that someone else can do or that someone else has influence over. That's the first category in number one, is then asking for help. The second category, though, is when there isn't anyone to ask for help, when there isn't anything that can be done about it. In those instances, then the question turns inward to say, what support do I need to move forward? I'm working with a team who tragically just lost one of their colleagues. There is no one that they can ask for help. They can ask for support. They can ask for what is the support that we need to move forward. But there isn't anyone that can undo this incredibly horrible thing that just happened to them. So in quadrant one, we have to determine, is this a place where someone can offer help? Or is this a place where I need to ask myself, what support do I need to move forward? The last thing I'll share with you in quadrant one is that there's brand new research from the London School of Economics that shows that it's not just whether or not you ask for help. It's not just who you ask. What the London School of Economics found is that it's how you ask. They determined there are two distinct ways of asking for help. One builds credibility, it builds trust, and it has positive impacts to your career. The other destroys credibility, weakens trust, has a negative impact on your career trajectory. And what they found is that it's how you ask for help. The kind that had the positive impact is when help was seen through the lens of growth and development. Where the lens was help me grow. I'm trying to learn this skill. I need help to do this thing. That actually built trust and credibility. Trust and credibility went down when help was seen as someone just dumping the work on them or delegating something and then not checking back in. So it's not just whether or not you ask for help, it's how you do it. And some of us may need coaching on how to ask for help in a way that drives trust and builds credibility. All right, team, I saved the best one maybe for last, but this is the one where you've got to roll up your sleeves because we've got stuff to do. This is the crank up your favorite playlist because we've got some actions on our to-do list. In quadrant two, you have said these stressors are important to me and I've got control over them. So by definition, there is an action for you to take. And I call it acting on the next right thing. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to have your 5-year plan figured out. When it's really hard, and quadrant two can feel really hard, it's about what is the next right thing. I think about the next right thing as it's helping me move forward and it's in alignment with my values. It's in alignment with my organization's values. If you act in a way that's outside of your values, your stress is not going to go down. If you act in a way that's outside of your organizational values, your stress is going to go up. So that's the key with quadrant number two. So as we get close to wrapping up, I wanted to make sure that you saw the heart at the center of the model. And it's not just there because it's cute, but can we agree it's so cute? It's so cute. Talia, thank you for nodding. I knew you would get it. So the heart's not there because it's cute. It's there because it represents compassion. It represents compassion for yourself and compassion for other people. Because if you do this exercise, if you go through the unstressing method in a way that drives shame or blame or judgment, it's not going to work. It's actually going to send stress up. It has to be compassionate for you and for other people. So what does that mean? Let's end with that. Let's end with, well, what is compassion? I define compassion as when there's connection in action. That's compassion. So if you think about it, I'm a visual person. So if you think about this ladder of connection, at the very bottom, we are disconnected from our colleagues. We are disconnected from our work. And as we move up the ladder, now we're feeling more connected. Trust is increasing. At the very bottom is pity. Nobody wants to be pitied. Nobody wants someone to say, oh, bless your heart. That's not helpful. Pity does not drive connection. If you see pity in your workplace, you don't want to see it. You want to pause and figure out a new way. We can move up one, which is sympathy. So sympathy is a little better. It's saying that I feel for you, but it's still, by definition, creating a distance. There is still a disconnect. When we cross over to connection, now we're in empathy. And we know that as humans, when there is connection, our stress levels go down, our trust goes up. And empathy is when we can say, I feel for you, I feel with you. And even if I haven't had the experience you're having, I can still show empathy because I know what the emotion is. That's empathy. And there's a lot right now in the workplace around empathy, leading with empathy, the power of empathy, and I am all about it. I am pro team empathy. And I would challenge us to go one step further. I would challenge us that we can actually go to compassion, which is not just I'm feeling with you. Compassion is I'm here to help. So if someone at work tells you they are feeling crushing amounts of stress, empathy is going to be nice. Empathy is going to help them feel connected when you say, gosh, yeah, I've been there. That's hard. But compassion is, what are we going to do about that? Compassion is, we can't sustain these levels of stress at work. What are we going to do differently? So here's a really quick last story, because I think the story will sum it up for you. And so, and Talia, you're not worried about time, are you? Because I promise I'll be done at 10.
Oh, well, you did have a bunch of good questions
Okay.
that came in, so I don't know if if you want to answer those.
Yeah, let me do this quick wrap up and then maybe we'll have a few minutes if you want to pull out like the top one or two questions. How's that?
Got it.
Awesome. Let's do it. Okay. So this is me when I turned 12. How not cool was I? But I started planning my 13th birthday on my 12th birthday. And I spent an entire year planning a party that unfortunately no one came to. No one came to my birthday party. And the party was supposed to start at 1 o'clock, and at 1:30 it was clear nobody was coming. And I call my friend, she picks up the phone, they're all laughing on the other side. And I run outside. Like to this day, when I feel overwhelmed, I just want to be outdoors. So I run outside, I'm crying uncontrollably. And a few minutes later, I look up and my 5 cousins are showing up on their bicycles. They were like a small but mighty cavalry coming to save the day. Because what I didn't know is that when I ran outside to cry, my brother called my cousins and said, you got to get here and you got to get here fast. So look what he did through the ladder of connection. He could have pitied me. He could have said, oh, bless your heart. He could have felt for me. He could have felt with me. But what he actually did was compassion. He put that in action. And it was, to this day, it was the coolest birthday party I've ever had. We set up a tent. We turned it into a sleepover. We had leftover birthday cake the next day for breakfast. So that is the difference with compassion. When we're able to say, there's a moment of stress, there's a moment of suffering, what is it we can do to help? And I promise you, my brother was not reading research from Harvard. He wasn't listening to leadership keynotes. He just did intuitively what felt right. Because as humans, we know how to demonstrate compassion. We know how to do it, but stress often gets in the way. I wanted to wrap, and then I would love to turn it over to you, Taya, for questions, because I think Anna Quinlan describes this beautifully. Because sometimes we are our own answer. So Anna Quinlan says it this way. She says, I read and walked for miles at night along the beach, searching for someone wonderful who would step out of the darkness and change my life. it never crossed my mind that that person could be me. So that is what I hope you walk away with today with work, that that is you. Less stress, more joy. Let's go. All right, Talia, questions. I'm ready.
All right. So, real quick, I'm going to start
Yeah,
with this one because I think folks are really inspired and ready to apply this like
great.
now. So, here's a question. Do you think we should do this quadrant activity collectively or each member do theirs individually?
I think it's both. So, what I do when I am working with teams is I encourage them to have gone through it by themselves. So they actually know what it feels like to see it, sort it, solve it. And then when we all come together, I ask them to bring their post it notes of stressors. That way, as soon as we come in, we can start mapping it on the framework. That's what I would recommend there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Someone else said, when you talked about sticky notes, I cannot add another piece of paper to my desk or my life. Is there any other way to lay out these stressors?
Yes, absolutely. My team is right now creating an app. So when the book comes out in March, Wiley is publishing it. It'll actually have an app. So if you are more prone to your phone, you'll be able to use the app to do it. I'm excited selfishly. I asked them to build the app because as a facilitator, I need a really quick way to work with teams when I'm managing dozens of these stressors at a time. So right now, I think we have to go old school, but in March, when the book comes out, you'll have a really cool app you can use.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Even more inspiration to get that book. Awesome. Okay. And then when talking about the stress ruler earlier and how
Yeah.
challenging stress can be, this question came in. What if we see it, we understand it, but our supervisor or manager doesn't, and nothing can change from our workplace, even if we're in our dream job?
Yeah. Well, so this is hard, and I'm going to say something that you may not want to hear, which is it may not be your dream job.
Oh,
Because when I think about a dream job, it's not a job where a supervisor is not hearing me, where my stress isn't realized.
yeah.
And so it might be, well, this is my dream job if X, Y, Z, A, B, C. But if those things aren't happening, then it's actually perhaps not your dream job. So in those instances, what I coach individuals to do is to think about what is within your control and what isn't. And if you've tried to make the changes, you've tried to have the conversations, you've tried to do everything you can do, and it's not changing, then the question becomes what's the impact it's having on you? What's the impact it's having on you? Yeah, great question.
That was a mind blown moment. Thank you for that. I'm
Oh,
sure a
yeah.
lot of people are just like, whoa, now I need to go back and think about that. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Thank you for bringing your joy and energy
Ah,
to this session and every session you do. And then for reminding us that leadership isn't just about what we do, but how we show up every day. Such a great way to start off our second day of the conference. So thank you, Amy. And I also want to thank our CART interpreters, our ASL interpreters, 7 star. A huge thank you to everyone for attending and participating in this session. We do ask that you fill out the survey at the end of the session so we can continue to improve the conference. And just a reminder for following sessions, that code to log in is capital CX2025. And thank you again, Amy. You're amazing.
thank you. I was so happy to be here. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your conference.
Bye, everyone.